Coming up on episode 89 of the Behind the Back podcast, Brock Purdy and Fred Warner have signed extensions for the 49ers. Ben breaks down the huge news over in San Francisco. Then we pivot on over to Philadelphia. Nick Sirianni gets his own extension after winning the Super Bowl. And Ben and I talk about the Tush Push surviving for another year. We discuss our takes on the ban and all the nonsense surrounding it. And then after that, we break down the Eastern and Western Conference Finals matchups. Game ones are in the books. We give our takes on who we think are going to win the series and our game one takes. So with that being said, y'all, let's get it. All right. Welcome back to another episode of the Behind the Back podcast. We are your hosts. I am Marcos Conan Negron, and beside me here, as always, is Ben, the Jet. Rets, Ben, how are you, brother? It's another week. How you feeling?
It's another week, but I'm not doing the hottest right now. You know, I've come down with a little bit of a cold. So my voice is gonna be a little bit deeper than normal, but you know, I'm here. This is a highlight of my week as always. So you know, I can't miss this.
Well, thanks for powering through. And yes, this was a very good week, as most of you guys heard in the intro here. So we're going to start with some football. Ben, we're going to start with the San Francisco 49ers, which probably was the best week that you would probably have had in like, what, a year and a half for this team?
Yeah, it's been a while.
So let's break it down, Ben. So you guys signed two massive deals. Go ahead and break them down.
Yeah, man. So it's been a busy week and a half for the 49ers. They went ahead and got two extensions done for two of their most important players, two team captains for the 49ers. They got the deal done with Brock Purdy, and they got the deal done shortly after with Fred Warner. So this is exciting because, you know, we're in the month of May right now. We're not even in June. We talked about all offseason, you know, last year about how Brandon Ayuk, all offseason, we couldn't figure out how to get that extension done. They couldn't, you know, figure out, a medium point to meet at, and it was just kind of a mess. And vibes were completely down. We talked about the vibes being down and yada yada, right? And obviously, it played into the season a major part. This isn't going to be the case, Marcos. The vibes are high. The vibes are good, and this is something that's key to this year if you want to have a successful year. But Let's start with Brock Purdy. So Brock Purdy signs a 5-year, $265 million contract with $181 million in guaranteed money. That's all good and gravy. The interesting part about this is this year, this coming season, he's still playing for $5 million. Okay, it's an extension. It's not a new deal kind of thing. He extended, which means it's on top of what's already here. So with that being said, you have this year playing at $5 million with the 5-year $265. If you break it up as a 6-year contract, it's essentially like a $45 million a year contract, which is awesome. Like it kind of makes you feel like, hey, that's a heck of a bargain. But then you kind of get into this contract and some of the details, and it really does work out to be a bargain. And I'll talk about that here in a second. But there is also a no trade clause attached to this. So, Marcos, this is something I know you're familiar with because Jalen Hurts also has a no trade clause in his contract, and they are 2 of 8 players to have such a thing in their contract, built into their contract. So, this is obviously a security point for a lot of players. They want control over their futures. They want a say. If the future isn't going the way they want to in a certain organization, they want a say in where they have to go. And so in a lot of ways, you can consider that to be $10 million. You know what I mean? Like for these guys, you can almost say it's like $10 million to them because it means so much to have a say in your future if it's not working out in the moment. So having that no trade clause is massive for him. You could say it's bad for the organization. I don't think it's bad for the organization necessarily because, the Niners have worked through similar issues before, not necessarily trade clauses, but they've worked through these guarantees or wanting to, land players in a place they want to be before. So they've worked through these things. But of all QBs drafted in 2022, Brock is the only quarterback to sign an extension and the only one to remain with that team that he was drafted with. The other 8 quarterbacks are, names that honestly aren't even worthy of being a part of this conversation. So I'm not even going to bother there. During the first 5 years of the contract, Purdy's, like I said, he'll make just over $44 million annually, about $9 million short of the initial number reported. That's a great deal for the 49ers and should allow them flexibility to continue to build around him. Additionally, Purdy's annual average will slot him at 19% of the current salary cap. That's kind of a big deal, and we'll talk about that in weeks to come as we talk about kind of how the Niners are essentially going to be building and retooling, right? Not just this year, but going into next year. So, the nice part about this deal is it gives the Niners flexibility. It gives them the ability to continue building and putting pieces around Brock Purdy. There was this awesome quote that I want to bring up before I pass the torch over to you here, that Brock had to say about the Niners in this contract negotiation. And I actually don't have it up right now, but I'll paraphrase it. He essentially said that he wanted to get this deal done. He wanted to work with both parties to get this deal done as soon as possible so that was off of the table. So they didn't have to worry about anything getting into, the training camps and so on and so forth. They want to get to work. And they also wanted this deal to work out where it both helps him and helps the 49ers to continue building around him, because good quarterbacks and good players know that just because you take $60 million a year doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be the best quarterback, because your team is hindered at that point into who they can put around you. So he took a nice, kind of a nice dollar amount here for the 49ers to build around him. I called it, and I kind of alluded to it months ago when we talked about this, kind of like the Tom Brady contract #1, right? Where he takes a little bit of a pay cut so that the team can continue building around him, and call it padding your stats, but you're going to get more paydays because you've got these good guys around you who are going to continue to help you put your stats on paper. So ultimately, I'm thrilled to get this contract done in the month of May. We're not talking about this in August at all. This is exciting times, and I'm thrilled to have Purdy here for another 6 years, dude.
Yeah, Brock Purdy's deal, $53 million. We talked about it all, the past couple months here, what we thought it would be. And honestly, at the end of the day, ending up at that $53 million, right with the Jared Goff contract, I think that's a perfect place where even you're going to have people who obviously don't like the contract. They're like, oh, they still shouldn't have paid him that much. But then if you were to compare them to the quarterbacks that are right above and right below him, I don't think there's an argument about the level of talent that he has and his ability to lead this team. So say what you want. I think in the long run, like you said, this is a win-win deal for both parties. Brock gets the ultimate raise coming from the last, Mr. Irrelevant contract, his position in the draft, and how much you get paid there to now. Making this level of a jump in a second contract is huge for everybody. So this is a good day for San Francisco. I think the Niners are invested in him. They believe that he's their guy. And I think that they approached this the right way, starting it early and finishing it early. And not just with Brock, but with all the guys that they signed in the offseason. So things are trending in the right direction for San Fran, doing things the right way. I'm really, really happy for Brock and you guys. I know Brock's your guy. You believed in him this whole time. So it's good to, get that chance for him to really prove himself now and take that next step as the leader in the face of this franchise. And that's always exciting to be a part of. So I'm happy for you. That's cool.
Yeah, 100%. We talked about where that money might land, and in my opinion, I think we kind of nailed that, right? We had it pretty centered, and ultimately coming in where he did. But initially reports were that he opened up with 65 million. He asked for 65 million, him and his camp, and the Niners kind of floated that out there, and Adam Schefter. He reported on this recently, saying that like he went around to other teams and essentially just asked if there's a market for Purdy like that. And a lot of the responses that he got were saying along the lines of like, he's a good quarterback, a really good quarterback, but he's really only great in the system that he's in right now. Like, he's only great for the 49ers. And in a lot of ways, that's absolutely true. I've done a lot of reflecting on that in the last like half of a season, honestly, when all these injuries went down with the 49ers this last season. You really saw how much of a product Purdy is to the system, and vice versa. And that to me, like, and in a lot of ways, the way that Brock Purdy was drafted, 262nd overall, completely saved that draft, and honestly probably saved John Lynch and or Kyle Shanahan's jobs in a lot of ways, because that draft was a complete miss in every other aspect. So why not take care of your guy in that sense? And they absolutely got that deal done. It is interesting to see kind of the how it all played out, but the biggest reason Brock gets the payday he does, man. I mean, Purdy on throws past the sticks since taking over as starter. I'm gonna throw this out there before we move on here to Freddie. He's second in completion rate, first in yards per attempt, second in passing yards, second in passer rating, second in pass touchdown percentage, first in passer rating with 106.2, tied for third in postseason wins. So dude knows how to ball. There's no doubt about that. But ultimately, what it also talks about and alludes to is that this team that Brock has been a part of works both ways for both parties. This is absolutely a recipe for success, continuing to have Brock on your team. And that's absolutely a reason, an ultimate reason why the 49ers wanted to pay Brock and keep him here for a number of years. So super stoked to have him. Let's move on here to Fred Warner. Fred Warner got extended for a 3-year, $63 million extension and $56.7 in guaranteed money. Fred's now $21 million a year, makes him the highest paid inside linebacker in the league after passing Roquan Smith by annual salary. He was only at, I think, $20 million a season, so he was only, I think, a mil behind Roquan Smith. So he just wanted to, get his crown back in terms of money, and he absolutely deserves it. Fred Warner is a missile, a heat-seeking missile, as Nick Bosa likes to talk about. And, Warner, he had 2 years remaining on his contract. Nothing was guaranteed at that point, though. He was in need of a new deal as he would enter the 2025 season as a $29.2 million cap hit. So by doing this extension, you open up cap space. You've essentially, like, it's the Howie thing, right? But it's the Lynch way. It's the cap creation, right? And this is creating space so that you can better your future and better your opportunities. So it helps both you as a team and it helps the player as well. So both parties end up happy. Marcos, if we look at the last month for the 49ers, they've got 3 team captains, 3 guys who are so important to what this team preaches and practices every single day, completely locked up for the future now. They've got George Kittle, Brock Purdy, and Fred Warner here to stay for a number of years. I really can't be much happier the way this offseason has played out, at this point. So I'm really thrilled.
No, absolutely. And for Fred Warner, he deserved every penny of it. And, last year he, kept it under wraps for a little bit, but he did play on that broken ankle for most of the season. And, that's just one of those things that just proves he's the ultimate dog. And he is the best linebacker in the league, and he deserves to be paid as such. He's going to continue to be a menace for years to come. So super happy for him. And like you said, you extended the core of what you want your identity to be for the future of this franchise. And again, for those who wonder, man, I thought the Niners were preaching, oh, we're trying to save money. We're trying to save money. And, in a way, what they were trying to do was prepare for this. And that's why they sold 6% of their stake. And that's why, they wanted to get just a little more revenue in the building so they can make these contracts happen. And now it's time for them to focus on the ultimate goal and getting younger and getting faster around these guys. And again, for those who have any qualms with the Brock Purdy contract, in 5 years, we're going to look and all of a sudden he's going to be the 15th highest paid quarterback. So I think that if you think about it now, the fact that he's right around the top 10 and then it's going to fall out, Jalen Hurts is about to get an extension here, and we're probably going to see him push the bill to be 60 million and him be the guy
Agreed.
who does that. And by the time Brock Purdy's next extension comes around, and the number is going to be even crazier. So that's just how it works in the NFL. So
well, and that's something Yeah, and that's something that like the Eagles do so well for a number of years now is they extend players before it gets to a point where, it's too expensive. And that's something I think the 49ers are, trying to exercise and practice a little bit more, obviously getting ahead of schedule on some things, right? And what it does is it ultimately saves you money in the future because especially with the quarterback market, especially with that market, with how much it changes and increases from year to year, from player to player. Like you're shocked when a quarterback is signed that's technically like a top 10 player and he's not resetting the top end market. You're shocked at that point because that seems like it's the norm right now, that if there's a really really good quarterback out there who's due for an extension, due for a new contract, he's going to get that top end dollar and just push it that much more. And if he doesn't, now here's the interesting part about this before we move on. Purdy moving up where he does in the top highest paid, right? And how you talk about how he'll probably fall down to 15. Every single player there is a comparison. You compare yourself as a player to X, Y, or Z player. And so you essentially go into these negotiations. Yeah, I want $65 million. No, we're not going to give that to you. Okay. Well, I'm better than this guy, and he's making this much money. This guy hasn't been to this, level of playing field. This guy's never been to an NFC, AFC championship. I have twice. So y'all should be paying me more than this guy. These are the conversations that happen when you get to that top 10 type talent. And that's something that when you slot yourself the way that Purdy did, and when you're the 49ers to get this extension done now and not ask him to play on a last year or, delay this any longer to a point where you have another quarterback get paid or whatever the case, like you're getting ahead of it. And that's the key to really, figuring out your monies as a team.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny that you say that in terms of just like comparison, because him and Jared Goff do really much have the same level of accomplishments, even though Jared's been around for a while. He has been to a Super Bowl, he has been to conference title games. So it is interesting for the Niners. I know the Purdy probably asked for 65, early on, but everyone wants to start high. But I think the Niners, if they felt like that baseline was good enough, and that's a great place to be. And like Ben said, the Eagles have done this for years now, and people always wonder, oh, when teams say that like they don't have the money to build around, it's not entirely true. You can pay a quarterback $50 million and not be strapped for, and not be able to build a roster around them. And the Eagles continue to do that each and every year, and teams can take that same approach. You just see teams like the Bengals wait too long, like the Cowboys wait too long, and they get themselves in these situations where now in that moment they actually don't have the money needed to pay this massive extension and then some. But if you get ahead of the game, then you won't have to worry about it. So the Eagles, fortunately can do that. And the Niners doing something similar, at least with the stars that have actually, made an impact for this team, and they know that they can moving forward is a good way of doing business. So this is W off season for them so far.
Yeah, exactly. So, final thoughts here to wrap up the Niners talk. I'm just thrilled with how this season has gone so far, and to lock up the guys that they have at this point. Um, Essentially, all the hardest things now are behind you, and now you can dead ass worry about football. Like that's huge, dude, because we're not even at the OTAs yet. Like you hit OTAs and you have nothing on your mind. You're just trying to get better. You're trying to get ready for the season. This is massive for the 49ers, especially if you want to talk about a rebound year. This is the year to do it, especially with an offseason like this. So I'm hyped, and 49ers fans should be too.
Yeah, and I listen. The discourse around this team is amazing as always. There's a lot of detractors who didn't like the Purdy contract, a lot of those who loved it, and it's just going to lead to more interesting stories down the line with this team. There will always be something to talk about with San Francisco. But again, good that you guys got everything done before OTAs, and it does. You will, this feels weird saying it, but it's coming from the experience that the Eagles experience with it, with the bounce back years of losing a Super Bowl too. We really did last year. Really did feel like despite the chaos in the early season, it did feel like a new season going into the offseason. We didn't have as much attention on us losing after being a year removed from losing the Super Bowl and struggling in the playoffs. And now the Niners are going to be they're going to be considered underrated or overrated. They're going to be overlooked because they have the easy schedule, and everyone's like, well, they have this easy schedule, so how serious are the Niners really going to be next year? So the Niners get to be in this position of playing with house money again and being the team that no one believes in again. So I think this is a good place to be.
Yeah, fully agreed.
All right, so we're done with the Niners here. Let's push on to talk about the Eagles. So the Eagles had an extension of their own, and it was with their head coach, Nick Sirianni. Now, the details of this deal have yet to come out. It's been a couple of days. They've been kind of hush-hush on it, but they said it's a multi-year deal, and that keeps Sirianni around for the foreseeable future. So the Super Bowl winning coach gets rewarded, and, if I really... Nick Sirianni is such an interesting story, because his career has been extremely successful, but at the same time, so bumpy. And you wouldn't think that a guy who has, 48 wins and 20 losses in his first 4 seasons, would receive the kind of attention that he has received over the years. And, Nick Sirianni has done everything for this franchise. And even when it felt like he should have been fired, even when it felt like there were better options out there, the Eagles stuck with this guy and believed in him. So, really happy that he got his extension. A lot of the guys, Jalen Hurts and Mailata, a lot of these guys came out and supported Sirianni after the contract came out. So it's great to see how this team has it already feels like this team is ready for next year and aren't really moving off of the Super Bowl win, which is it's nice to see them still motivated. So I know Sirianni is the head of that snake. So no, so far super happy that he's here, and I'm happy for the team. I think this kind of continuity, it just shows that this team does have the potential to be something special here. So far, really excited to see it.
Yeah, I fully agree with the extension of Nick Sirianni. As much as I can't stand the guy, he's like the Brandon Graham to me, right? Like the dude himself he's very emotional, and that's not a negative thing. Emotional is not a negative thing, right? But he's extremely smart, and Nick Sirianni, it's hilarious to me to hear last year all the talks of Eagles fans and honestly just NFL fans in general talking about how Nick Sirianni's should be on the chopping block. He shouldn't be a coach for the Eagles anymore. He shouldn't even be a coach at this point. He should be a coordinator. Like, this is a joke. He's a joke of a yada yada. To see how this whole season played out, wins the Super Bowl, and people still don't want to give him credit, but you know who will is the Eagles organization, and they paid that man. And I will be curious to see what that contract looks like, because he being the winningest coach in Eagles history absolutely deserves whatever money is coming to him. And based on how the Eagles do business, they took care of him.
Absolutely. There was only 3 coaches all time that have won 70% of their games and have won a Super Bowl, and that's Vince Lombardi, John Madden, and Nick Sirianni. So listen, the discourse around Nick Sirianni has always been whether or not he actually is a good coach. Like, what does he do for the organization? He's not an X's and O guy. He's not, this guy who has this elaborate scheme. And you and I just talked about this because I had this thought, and we talked about it earlier today off air, and I wanted to bring it up now because I thought it was a good point. I think Nick Sirianni is the Brock Purdy of head coaches. And I only compare Brock Purdy for the Eagles is Nick Sirianni, when we hired him, was not this high pedigree coach. He was kind of this last name on on a list of names that weren't that great to begin with. And we end up with Sirianni, and no one really believes in him. He has this awful interview to start. He compares this team, the flowers blooming and everything like that, and it was ugly. And nobody really believed in what he could do. And then he got the Eagles into the playoffs. He transformed that season. Jalen Hurts' first season with him, and they committed to running the ball a lot. They got to the playoffs and yada yada. Then they got A.J. Brown, and things got a lot better. And they became this playoff style team. They made it to the Super Bowl. They were darlings. His energy was, annoying but addictive to the fans. Like, they believed in the message he was preaching. He had that Dan Campbell hype to him. And then the collapse happened and everyone's like, he's a bum. He's not good enough. This team is too good, to be losing like this. He should be able to, this is on him because he's too erratic. And then beginning of last year was the same thing up until the Cleveland game when when he's screaming at our own fans and stuff like that. They're like, he's out of, they broke him. Like he needs to get removed. So, and then he wins the Super Bowl. We go on this crazy run. He gets some credit, but then he doesn't. So I think he's Brock Purdy of head coaches because he doesn't have the pedigree. Even when the team does something good, it's not because of him. It's because of how he's created this incredible roster and the Eagles are awesome and these players should be winning games. But then when they lose, it's like, oh, Nick Sirianni can't get these guys together. This is Nick Sirianni's fault. You have too good of a team to, you shouldn't be losing these games. But then he has all these accolades that support, hey, he's a good coach. Like he's winning all the time and his offenses and defense are consistently in the top 10. Like these guys rally, they play good for him. Like they believe in him. Everyone internally believes in him. The fan base is still torn on him. They don't truly believe in him one way or the other. Some are like, he's not a good head coach. Let's bring in Belichick. And others are like, oh, he's the best coach ever. He's perfect for Philly. And then he wins the Super Bowl, and now even still, the conversation is like, I don't even know if Nick Sirianni is a good head coach still. And I felt like with Brock Purdy, he gets paid. There's these people who don't believe in him, people that will. And even if I truly believe that even if Brock Purdy wins the Super Bowl and wins Super Bowl MVP, you will have people after that game saying, hey, I don't know if Brock Purdy's an elite QB, even though he just did the things that I said he couldn't do. It's like how I felt with Jalen. So Nick Sirianni's this awesome coach, but he has had this crazy ride. But now he's a Super Bowl champion, and now he gets to continue winning because I do think that this team is good enough to be something special in this era. I think this is a golden era of Eagles football right now. And he's the head of the snake now. So, that was kind of a little thought comparison I had.
No, and initially when I read it, I was like, nah, F that. That's no, there's no way. Like, don't you dare compare my guy to Nick Sirianni. That's a joke. And then I'm like thinking about it. I'm like, holy crap. No, this is fully accurate. Because, for instance, you put that list out. What was it? It was Lombardi and Madden.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So look at that company that Nick Sirianni is with, right? That's elite company. That's Hall of Fame company. And then you look at some of the numbers, for instance, that Brock Purdy's putting up. Obviously, he's got a number of years left in his career. But he's putting up Hall of Fame level numbers right now. And especially with the passer rating. And yet no one's going to give him, these guys credit when they're up and when they're winning. But the second that our teams start to struggle, who are the guys that they're going to start blaming? They're going to blame Brock Purdy and they're going to blame Nick Sirianni. And they're not going to look at anybody else. Why? Because for one, Nick Sirianni was the last choice of head coaches, and in a lot of ways, fans don't like Nick Sirianni for his attitude, for his emotions, whatever. And so they're going to blame him. For Brock Purdy, he's the last pick in the draft. Nobody wants to give him the credit that, he deserves or anything like that. And so whenever there's anything that's happening, even if it is his fault or if it's not his fault, it's always going to go towards Brock Purdy. It's always going to be, well, you don't have an elite quarterback. You just have a game manager, a check down merchant. So this is an awesome comparison. Ultimately, like I said, I hated it initially, but it makes sense. And it's just kind of a product that we've got to deal with, as fans of these teams, because when you recognize what these guys do for their organizations and you sit there and you realize their importance and what they mean to the organizations that they're a part of. And obviously you see the paydays that these guys have now gotten. It checks out on our end. It's like, yeah, this makes sense. And this is exactly what we've been talking about for years now. So It's cool to see. It's cool to see Nick get his payday as well.
Yeah, extremely successful. And now it's just a matter of can he keep it up. So, extremely excited for the Eagles. This is a great place to be, coming off a Super Bowl win, you're paying, everyone's extended and you got, your head coach locked up, and it's his reward too, because he's had to change his coaching style every single year into something that the team needs him to be. And he was able to step up in every way. And So then, now the next topic we want to talk about with the Eagles is coming from the owners' meeting. We had brought it up previously a couple months ago, and it was whether or not the Tush Push was going to get banned. It got tabled until today. And now there was a lot of drama surrounding this, even last week and upcoming before this, But as this morning, came up, there was the owners were meeting in Minnesota, and the Eagles sent in reinforcements to lobby against the Tush Push ban, and they sent in Jason Kelce into this owners meeting. And they have for the owners meeting, all 32 owners meet. They talk about different rule changes, all that stuff. They vote on it. For example, they voted on the NFL flag football. Now the NFL players can compete in the Olympics for flag football in 2028. So they voted on that. That was a 32-0 sweep. So in order to pass a bill or pass a rule change or something like that, you need 24 of the 32 votes to pass. Now, when at the first meeting a couple months ago, the Eagles, they had the initial vote, and it was 16, so about split. It was split even. And they're like, but we're still going to table this, and we can vote on this again later. And we get to today, and they have Jason Kelce in there, and they had Jason Kelce, Jeffrey Lurie spoke for about 45 minutes to an hour, pleading their case on why the Tush Push should not be banned. And they brought Kelce in there because Kelce actually provided insight on how they're coached to run the play and the purpose of what they're trying to do when they run the play. And this was according to Adam Schefter, who got insider information from people who were in the meeting. And so Kelce spent some time lobbying that, and Lurie had like this he had this super impassioned speech, but then he kind of got a little defensive and started criticizing, saying like, oh, you guys, are just scared, you're punishing, us for one team for being successful type of thing. That's kind of a loser mentality type of thing. That's the energy he gave off. And the vibe apparently in this room, it was super intense. And you got other owners like Jed York in the middle of this while Jeffrey Lurie saying stuff literally, and I quote, saying, do you have any more shit you need to say? So Jed York of the San Francisco 49ers is out here starting some crap with our owner. And I'm sure he, listen, maybe you don't want to hear about the Tush Push for 45 minutes before you got to vote. You want to get, your own owners with better things to do, whatever. But so they plead their case, and the Eagles won the vote 22-10. So they won by 2 votes. And I think it's poetic justice in a way, because the Green Bay Packers were the one who initially submitted this request to eliminate the Tush Push. And it's poetic justice because they lost the vote 22-10. And that's also the score that the Eagles beat them in the playoffs, was 22-10. So I thought that was a funny little nugget there. Kind of a little punch to the face. So the Tush Push survives at least for another year. Don't know if it's going to be up for a vote. Before we talk a little more about it, what do you think about the Tush Push surviving now that it's official?
Good. Look, anybody has the ability to run this play. The difference is that you just can't run it to the level that the Eagles can. And because that's the case, you want to ban it. Like, it's so soft to me that this is even a topic that was brought to such an important day full of meetings and decisions to be made for all these owners. This is stupid. It's really dumb to me. But the biggest takeaway I had from this, I laughed my ass off when I heard that quote from Jed York saying, how much more shit he needed to say about it. Because look, the fact you got to go out there and lobby for an hour about this thing, it's wrong. And honestly, it's not even wrong for the Eagles' sake. It's wrong that they have to go out there and say this whole spiel for an hour just to try and convince these teams to, keep a play on the table that is a football play, right? So that part's dumb. What's hilarious to me, and also annoying to me, is that Jed York says this and then lobbies to ban it. He votes. He's one of the soft owners to lobby to ban the play. And to me, I'm surprised by this. I think Jed, he might be a soft guy. That's one thing. the organization, the Niners organization, is not one you typically talk about being a soft organization, right? I mean, look what happened to Devondre Campbell, right? None of how they handled that was soft. None of how they've handled previous situations of players and so on and so forth has been soft. This was soft. And I'm curious to hear the reason why Jed even, went this route in the first place. But he did end up tweeting afterward. He said, tons of respect for Jason Kelce. Definitely owe you a bourbon or two. And, I love it. It's ultimately like, it's on the table. It's something that had to be discussed. It was discussed. Jason and Lurie did a really good job of going to bat for this organization and putting out a a conversation and a product on the whiteboard that essentially convinced teams like this is just simply something we do extremely well. And Nick Sirianni went on a interview. I'm not sure how recently this was. I just saw the clip today. But he was talking about how much effort and how much work they put into that play. It's not just something that they have in their back pocket. They're like, oh, we haven't ran this in a couple of weeks. We'll run it. No, they actually practice this. And if you're putting in the effort to do it, there's other teams that probably aren't doing it. Well, maybe if you try putting in the damn effort, you might get as good as they are. Or if you draft and build a freaking massive unit that is the Eagles O-line and have guys who are Jalen Hurts and Saquon who can bench over 400 pounds, like you're going to have these kind of plays be as successful as they are. So it's a product of what they're building in Philadelphia, and it's a product of the style of play that they have out there. It's not something you should be banning. It's something that is working to their advantage based on how they've built their team. This is foul that we have to have this conversation.
I really appreciate you saying that, because I actually didn't think you were going to go that route, but this is good. This is because that's exactly how I feel. I actually think even more on top of this, the more we hear about it, Roger Goodell was actually one of the people who was against this play too. So it's interesting that the NFL really, he doesn't like the fact that the Eagles are able to run this play, and
they want flashy.
Well, yeah, and it's disappointing because I think that what was even more disappointing was the Packers had to revise their original submission, and they, instead of attempting to remove just a tush push in general, they wanted to remove pushing players altogether, pushing players forward altogether, which is a rule that was in place from the beginning of the NFL until 2005. And up until 2005, you couldn't pull anyone forward. And then they also added that if you were to do that, it was a 10-yard penalty. And I think that, okay, my question to you is, what would you rather see? Would you rather see a push of some sort, a guy getting dragged, and not just even in a tush push play, but in any kind of play that might impact a big moment or trying to get a first down? Or do you want to see more flags for something so ticky-tack? So I'm like, the NFL doesn't want more flags. I don't think that's going to make things any better either. So it's just, it sucks that they almost decided to punish the league and have to change the entire rules in general over one version of the sneak. And so that to me was kind of crazy. So I'm glad that it's here, even if it's for one more year. I hope, if I'm bettors out there, I would bet that if there was a anytime tush push touchdown for the first touchdown of the season, that would be against the Cowboys in front of Goodell. I would bet that the Eagles do a tush push just to say F you to the NFL week 1. So this has been the play that has defined this team for this era of Sirianni and Hurts together. Mm-hmm. And it's not just those two. It's the entire team has embodied this identity of the tush push and perfecting the craft. And I just think that I don't think it would have made a difference to the Eagles as a whole, to the objective to winning, if we weren't able to run this play. I actually think, and the Eagles players actually think, that they don't need to push to make the sneak work anyway. We're still physical enough to beat you on a regular sneak. So if that play goes,
it's not like you guys have the best running back in football either, right?
Exactly. So it made it all. It was just, you could just tell it was a targeted move, and it sucks because it was against a team who clearly you've had their number and they are annoyed with you, and there's a hint of jealousy, and it's just interesting that that's the narrative that could decide. And they were that close to basically just stripping away a piece of this Eagles team. And I think, again, I still don't think it wouldn't have crippled us or anything. The talent still speaks for itself. The Eagles weren't defined by the tush push. We utilized the tush push in a way no other team could, but we still won plenty of games without needing to use the tush push. We could have won that Super Bowl without doing a tush push at all either. So it's just like it's just one of those things that don't take something away from us just because we perfected it, because we worked really hard to make this happen. And anyone can do it, just like you said. Everyone can do it. We talked about it the whole time. That's why I was so confused with the discourse of this play to begin with. So I think that's enough about the tush push, but because now it's here to stay. So now they can't say anything about it. And maybe I'll have a moment every single week next year if it's just going to be a tush push here and a tush push that mattered here, because they freaking deserve it. This might be, there was one last thing I heard. And this was an interesting topic that I think might mean something if they do end up banning the play, or if they do run this play for years to come. What would be the possibility that the Eagles actually do a tush push statue in front of the link? Like they had the Philly special outside. So what if they had the tush push and not like, and the idea would be like the formation. So it'd be like Jalen lining up behind the O line and then the guys behind him type thing. So that would be, someone brought that up on the Eagles radio today, and I was like, that's actually not a bad idea. That would be pretty cool if they did something like that.
That would be interesting. We should have a running counter this coming season of, a tush push counter, right? That just every time they run the tush push, we just dial it up. One more.
No, that'd be funny. I know so for context too, in the past 3 seasons, they ran it 118 times, which doesn't sound like a lot, but it also does.
No, that's a lot.
When you compare the next closest team in that 3-season span, that was the Bills, and they ran it 55 times. And then no other team ran it more than 16 times in 3 seasons.
Wow.
So that's how little it's been used. To the Eagles, they're just they're just spamming a play that is a pretty high success. So I mean, that's a good way to win games. So
well, I mean, when your quarterback can't throw the ball, it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you just need him to push the ball forward, whatever. Yeah. Well, I'll let you get away with the Jalen Hurts slander since it's Brock Purdy's pod, so I'll let you have it. All right, so let's move on. I gotta tell you, dude, the Knicks and the Pacers are in overtime right now. So
yeah, I don't know what happened. So
whoa, hold up. First, let's take a break real quick. Even though we don't have ads, I don't care. We're gonna take a break. We'll be right back. All right, we are back. So we had to step away because we saw that the Knicks Pacers game went into overtime after the Pacers were down 17 in the fourth. So we thought we could talk about this game freely and not have to worry about it. But it was under 20 points in the NBA. So what are we thinking? So the Indiana Pacers come out on top in overtime, 138-135, off of some. It was just back and forth. No defense was being played at the end there. Mm-hmm. So now we talked about this series last week, kind of previewing. We had the idea that this was going to be the matchup, and we both sided on the opposite sides here. I was saying the Pacers will probably win in 7 because, as evidenced even more so by tonight, I think this team just feels like a team that's never out of it, a team that everything just seems to be going their way. And Halliburton hits another just unbelievable shot to send it into overtime in the first place. And so it's like I don't know. I don't like it. I still think this is a 7-game series, but I do think the Pacers stealing home court, the Pacers winning this series last year, it's hard, at least in this matchup, to just see the Pacers, lose this series. But this is obviously instant reaction to them watching them win a really closely contested game that they fought back from. And for New York, this is a stinger in front of your home fans. Like, this is, I don't know what you think your initial takeaways are from this first game and what you think of the series so far.
It's unacceptable for the Knicks to drop this game, honestly. But, you've got to hand it to the Pacers for battling back in. You've also got to hand it to them for making it to the Eastern Conference Finals 2 years in a row. So they have the experience here at this stage. You can't say that they don't, right? Um, yeah, this is Hallie holding up the choke symbols. Crazy. Um, so for me, I don't think this game represents how the series is going to go. I believe fully that New York's going to win a game in Indiana, and this series is going to go 7 games. If it doesn't, it'll be 6 games. So it's going to be 6 or 7. I still have the Knicks. For a better part of this game, until it mattered most, the Knicks were the better team. And, early on, the Pacers looked really good. They were finding their rhythm offensively. They were getting good stops. But, ultimately, like, New York found a rhythm. They got into the game. They took a commanding lead in the fourth quarter and threw it away, similar to what the Cavs did, 3 times in the last series. So part of it's like, how much of it is Indiana and how much of it is the teams that they're playing. And that's where I'm battling with myself right now, because is it like a part of me that just doesn't want to believe in Tyrese and Indiana, or is it genuinely I don't see them as the better team because they've been at such deficits so many times throughout this playoff run, and they've obviously found ways to come back in, but it's taken a lot. It's taken teams going on monumental shooting or lack of scoring. It's droughts, right? And they're able to fight back in. In this game, I didn't watch the 17-point comeback because we were recording. I'm going to be watching tomorrow to see how it went. But right now, like, my initial reaction, great for Indiana. New York has to win game 2. And I think they have to win game 3 as well if they want this series to go past, 5 or 6 games. Because if New York drops game 2, I really do think that's GG's. I think at that point, it's a 5-game series. If New York wins game 2 and drops game 3, I think it's probably still a 5-game series. I think Indiana probably, comes back home or it goes back to New York and takes it. So it's fully contingent now on how well Indiana does on their court in game 2 and then also on the road in game 3.
Yeah. So, yeah, for New York, I agree with you. It's unacceptable. You are a team that you guys were able to take down Boston. Listen, and they were going toe for toe with Boston even before the Tatum injury. So you guys were able to beat a team of that caliber, and this is a team that you can't handle. But they do play 2 different styles. And the question, it was funny. I was listening to the halftime show. I caught it for a second, and Charles Barkley was talking about, if the Pacers think that they're going to be able to run up and down the court 7 games against the Knicks, that's foolish. But I wonder how much of it is the reverse. How much of it does New York think that if they get into a track race with Indiana, will they be able to keep up for a 7-game series? I don't think the physicality is an issue for Indiana. Indiana is, I believe, equally physical. They're out there getting physical and getting mad at each other and stuff like that. It's a physical game out there. So I don't think that New York has this significant edge in physicality. And I think Indiana, with their ability to just pop off at any time, they're never out of a game. Even though they did get into this deficit, they were able to climb out and still be and finish looking like the better team. Even if at the very end, Jalen was putting together he was put together a great performance, but it always he didn't get the help that he needed to today, and I think that's going to be huge. I think Jalen and Tyrese are going to be able to do what they need to do to get this series, for either one of their teams. But it is going to come down to which one of these secondary guys are going to be able to take over, because Pascal's been an awesome number 2. Will Cat be able to take advantage? He wasn't able to tonight. He had an open shot, and so did Jalen. Created a look, he missed it, but Cat had an open shot there to at least send this game into double overtime, and he wasn't able to capitalize either. So it's tough to predict, but I do think I would say that the Pacers would win this series, but I still think it's going to be too close. I think these 2 teams are very hotly contested, but I do think that the size advantage at all positions that the Pacers have is kind of the advantage that's going to drive them the rest of the series. I think they're going to be pesky enough, and I think they're just going to have more energy. I think that they can match the physicality and on top of that play at their own pace. And they're not scared of this New York team, just like New York isn't scared of them either. But I think that benefits them. So that's kind of where I feel on that series.
All right, fair enough. So we've got differing opinions on how the series is going to end. You know, both sides, you can argue either way. It makes sense, right? There's an argument for both teams. Both these teams are in the Eastern Conference Finals for a reason. They're both two of the top teams in the East, and should be taken as such. So this is going to be a fun series. I'm excited to see how this plays out. I'm sticking with my Knicks. You're sticking with the Pacers because you're a Tyrese Glazer.
Sure. Yeah, it sucks. Oh my gosh, dude.
Do we miss him? Do we miss him?
No, I really don't. Like, I don't miss him.
I don't either.
But it's the whole plotting on the downfall type thing. Like, it's awesome that he's doing this. Like, I hate that I respect the game so much that I just respect greatness in terms of, like, if someone's doing something incredible,
yeah,
I will respect that, even if they're not on the team that I love the most. So it's like, Tyrese is doing his thing. He's out here being clutch and saving this team time after time. So it's like, it's hard not to believe in that for an objective perspective of how I believe these playoffs will go. It's hard not to watch this team and actually feel like they have that kind of it factor a little bit.
Yeah, that's totally fair.
Yeah, so let's talk about the West Coast now. Let's talk about the Oklahoma City Thunder and the Minnesota Timberwolves. Now, this was just kind of like this one, only the lead that generated stayed that way. But this was a close game up until, I would say, midway through the third quarter. I think the Wolves even had a lead early in the third in this game. And then it just kind of fell apart for them. But I think for me, I think obviously the Thunder played really good defense. I thought that overall they were allowed to play physical, and they were forcing turnovers. I think they forced 17 turnovers. So if you have that many turnovers against a defense this good, you're going to pay, and it's going to cost you games. But I couldn't help but notice, and to clarify, I believe OKC is going to win this series. I thought OKC was going to win the series. I think it would be cool if Minnesota won the series, but I believe OKC is going to win the series, and I think it's going to be in 6. I didn't like the way Shai Gilgeous-Alexander seemed like he had his own different game that was being called compared to literally everybody else. It felt even on all the other players except SGA. And he creates his own contact, and I applaud him for being a master at the craft, a la old school James Harden back in the Rockets. Like, I can appreciate that. That's a skill. But it sucks that in a playoffs where the past couple of years they've been preaching this game's going to look entirely different in the playoffs. We're going to be more physical in the playoffs. We're going to let you play a lot more in the playoffs, that he gets away and rewarded for ticky-tack nonsense that he creates. And I think I saw a lot of that when this game started swinging in the Thunder's direction in this game. And I think that Minnesota, obviously offensively, Anthony Edwards didn't show up either. So it was a lot of that compiled together. But I do think that this was one of the few games I noticed where it was kind of blatant, where it felt like a lot of home court calls were going specifically Shai's way.
Yeah, I agree with you. I've felt like Shai is a free throw merchant. And I felt that way for at least this season. I think I felt that way last season as well. And then I saw a video about 2 hours ago, and this is a video on the Dan Le Batard show. Yeah. So, and I'm not sure. I'm not familiar with the show, not super familiar with the show. I think I've seen some clips here and there, but his handle is Darth Amin. He talked about, Shai and this whole free throw merchant thing. And here's what he said. He's quoted as saying, I looked up guys who led the league in free throw attempts per 100 possessions. Shea is outside the top 30. He's not egregious and he's not flopping. He's getting fouled, and that's part of the game. Where I agree with him, or where I see it, is like, okay, so he's outside the top 30, and guys who were inside the top 10 were guys like Joel Embiid. A couple of years ago, James Harden, like 20, what was that, 13, 14, 15-ish. Those Rocket days when he was doing the sweep through motion and getting called every single time, shooting 25 free throws a game. Those guys are exploiting the game. Shea has found a way to exploit the game as well. And you can say that, he's flopping and so on and so forth. What I see more than anything isn't necessarily flopping from him. And I can't believe I'm defending him because I still don't like the way that he's doing it. But what he's doing is every time he drives the paint, every time he goes inside, takes the ball to the rack or anything, cuts anything, he does essentially like a like sidestep style of cut where you're going to draw contact. And the second that he has that contact, because his strides are kind of like the size that they are, he doesn't have the longest legs, but he's not a short guy either. Because he takes the strides he does, he's able to quickly react to those hits and then force an off-balance shot. And it looks a lot like he gets, an egregious amount of contact when really there might be something minute there. But regardless, it is a foul. So in a lot of ways, yes, he's exploiting, but it's also because he's putting defenders in a very vulnerable position pretty much every time down the court. And that's because they have to respect him at all three levels. So again, I can't really believe that I'm defending him in this case. It's interesting that it was an interesting take that I, kind of watched and read about. But ultimately, dude, like this OKC team, what I saw in this game was just defensive dominance over the Wolves. Like, for instance, there were a number of times where they would kick the ball into the post or they would dish the ball over for an ISO play to Anthony Edwards. And backdoor Jalen Williams would steal the ball. I saw him do it 2 or 3 times last night. And even in the clutch time. And I didn't see the Wolves reacting to that, and adjusting. They are trapping every player. Whoever has the ball, they're finding a way to trap them. And then that trap player makes a terrible, read with the ball. So what I'm curious to see is in game 2, how the Wolves are able to adjust to that. How the Wolves are able to adjust to this Oklahoma City style of defense. Because this is the number 1 defensive team in the league right now. This is a team who obviously is built from the ground up together. They're extremely young. They're extremely talented, extremely athletic. They've got a 12-man deep roster. This is a team that is fully ready for a finals run. So what I'm looking at in this series, because I agree with you, I think it's OKC, but I want to see how the Wolves adjust. Because if the Wolves are able to adjust and keep game 2 close, then let's say they go back home, you get some momentum on your side, you pick up game 3. Okay. Maybe you get game 4. You can call it steal, right? Steal game 4 because the odds aren't in your favor in this series. Now you're looking at a 2-2 series. So things get interesting as this plays on. And obviously, having to play a team more than 4 times in a series, you learn a lot about the other team. And experience is really going to, boil down for a lot of these guys. So I'm curious to see the Wolves and how they, how do they adjust to this series.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think if there's anyone, that we truly can't count out too in the West, the version of like that guy who can make something out of nothing, it's Anthony Edwards. And I do think that, he had a bad game 1, but it's only a matter of time before we see him go for 30 or have a big 40-point game or something like that. So it will be interesting. I do think, I agree with you. I think OKC is like the Philadelphia Eagles of the NBA right now, just like a perfectly built roster, no real holes, dominant on both sides of the ball. And they're just going to kill you in so many ways. And they have the MVP on their team. So I do think it's so Shea also won MVP today for those who didn't know, just in case. It was announced. So congrats to him too. So, and like, listen, I complained about how it was officiated in game one, but I still believe that um, OKC, when it kind of got down to it, they kind of did flex their muscles a little bit. And I do think that them going through the Denver series the way they did really helped them mature. And especially since the way they dominated game seven and really just silenced the doubters, I think for them, they really, guys like Jalen Williams, I think you really see him kind of taking that step to be even more confident. So I do think it's good for him and that team. I think that OKC is just, and not to mention they've stayed healthy. When you're this good and you've stayed healthy, it's kind of things are trending in the right direction for you. So OKC really does feel confident in who they throw out there, and they're going to make things tough for Minnesota all series. But Minnesota can make things tough too if they find a rhythm offensively. They can go toe to toe with OKC. It's just a matter of will they be able to do that for all four quarters in a playoff game. I think for Minnesota, things really have to go their way now if they really want to pull out this series.
Yeah, agreed. And I'm excited about this series. I think it could be a competitive series. If I think best case, I can see it going about 6 games. Worst case, it's a full sweep. And I think that's absolutely on the table based on, the level of play that Oklahoma City brings to the table. This is a really good team. This is, in my opinion and in many people's opinions and even betting favorite opinion, this is the best team in the league. And so in all, respects, they should be winning this series pretty handily, especially by the betting odds. So like I said, I'm really curious to see how the Wolves, come out in game 2. If they come out in game 2 and make this a game, I'm going to be really locked into the rest of the series because I'll have a pretty good feeling that they can pick up game 3 at that point. It's coming back home. You're in the Western Conference Finals. It's going to be a loud crowd. Minnesota fans have shown out throughout the years. They've shown out so far this postseason. This has been fun to watch. Oklahoma City crowd has been incredible, but yeah, picking up that game 3 is going to make the series very interesting. Now, if they pick up game 2, this could get really interesting. So we'll see.
Absolutely. And I think this is what makes, this Final Four so fun, is that there is so much at stake for all of these franchises. New York, we're going to see a younger face win the title. We're going to see one of these elite young point guards or one of these guards win a title. And OKC, Indiana, and Minnesota, this could be their franchise's opportunities for their first titles. And for New York, it'll be the first title in 50 years. So there's a lot of history on the line here, and this is going to be really cool no matter how it turns out. So this is an exciting time for the NBA, for the next era of the NBA. This is like the first finals, and I think the past 15 years that doesn't feature LeBron, Steph, or Durant. So it's very it's cool to see this next generation kind of take over now. So this will be fun.
And that reminds me, I saw something the other day, and I'm sorry, I don't quite remember. I think it was for the first time and this is the part I'm rusty on. I think it was 30-something years or 30 years. The Western Conference Finals hasn't featured a team from California or Texas.
Oh, wow.
Crazy, right? And at first I was like, wow, and the only team that's not in that conversation is the Kings. And then I was like, oh, wait, 2001, we was there. But that was the last time. So it was interesting. This is the first time that, it really hasn't been on the true West Coast like that.
Exactly, for sure. No, that's a cool little nugget. All right, brother. So we made our predictions for how we think it's going to go. Well, by the time we meet up next week, we'll definitely be closer to, how closer to having an answer on who wins these series and who will be the representatives in the finals. So we'll probably give a little preview depending on, how the rest of these series turns out. But a lot of big news this week, a lot of fun stuff happening this week. And now we can kind of push on for the rest of the offseason, which is for both of these sports. It's going to be a good time for us because now we really don't have that much going on. So it'll be exciting for sure.
Yes, sir.
All right, y'all, we're going to end that here. With that being said, this was episode 89 of the Behind the Back podcast. You can hit us up at behindthebackpod13@gmail.com. For all y'all watching on YouTube, we got all of our socials up above. For all you audio listeners out there, the links to the descriptions are down below. Please give us a like, subscribe, rate, review, and follow. All the likes that we get help the show grow. Everyone, we love and appreciate all the love and support we've received. We're growing with you guys each and every single week. So we have big plans coming up in the next few months here. So we're really excited to grow with you guys. So I'm Marcos Conan Negron. Beside me here, as always, is
Ben the Jet Rats.
All right, y'all. We love y'all. We'll talk to you next week.
Peace.
Peace.